Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is remove the camera pod, which is right here. And I already took off the M3 screws. And as you can see, it's just one nice little carbon frame protector piece. Actually, it's a couple pieces, but so it's got the two sides and then it's got the top. And now what I'm going to do is I've got my RunCam Swift. I've taken it out of the box and I've kind of figured out how to dry fit it, so hopefully that can be seen on camera. So basically I've got all this room here to mount the camera. Now what I'm gonna do is I've got some screws included. I typically run my camera probably at the max that you can run it, which so it looks like maybe about 30 to 35 degrees here. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the screws in and tighten it just like that. So I'll put a screw here and a screw on the other side. Go ahead and do that. See, the one side's in pretty well, but yeah, it's moving around a little bit, so I'm gonna experiment with this before I put it in. Alright, I found a little bit better option. So this camera also has, there's a screw hole here, and there's a screw hole here, and it turns out the screws I was trying to use fit better in the gold plated screw hole, so I'm going to go ahead and use that, which they're not really moving around much and they seem like they're actually supposed to go there, and the frame allows me to get them in there, so that's nice, so I don't have to worry too much about this. That actually looks pretty good. The nice thing with this is after I put it back in here, I can pretty easily adjust the height of the camera. That seems about like how I normally fly them. It might be a little bit steeper, but that's pretty good. The other nice thing is I'll have room for my cord here, so my cord can, when I connect the camera, will come out right here. So I think this is a pretty good setup. The only thing I don't like about it is the camera. If I do have maybe a crash where I hit the top, I could knock it down a little bit and damage the lens, but I don't think that'll happen. It's very similar to how I run my 180, so just another view. I think that's going to run really well, so we'll go with that. So now I'm going to connect the camera wires to the camera. Basically, you've got a video, ground, and what is that? 5 to 17 volt, which means I can, if I wanted to, I could run a anywhere from, I guess, a 2S to a 4S. I'm going to be hooking this up to a Beck though, so it won't really matter as much. There's also the yellow is the video, the red is the positive, and the black is the ground. So these just fit, they just snap right into this. So the nice thing about using a Beck is that if I'm powering my camera and my video transmitter off of that, I'm not going to have any issue when I give throttle, increase throttle with the rest of my quad, so, or the hex here. So I shouldn't have any kind of banding or any kind of issues on the video signal. Alright, so I've got the camera in the pod now, I've got the wires attached. Basically I'm going to just dry fit it. That's how it's going to kind of handle, which I think is good. So as you notice, I've got quite a bit of wire here. I definitely don't need that. First thing I'm going to do before I solder is I'm going to trim these leads down a little bit. Separate the wires. Alright, so now I've got some exposed wire, and I'm going to go ahead and get my soldering iron, which I've got here, and get it nice and hot. I run it about 280 to 300 Celsius, and then I'm simply going to tin the wire. So now the wire is pretty much ready. Now I need to do the same thing here. Now some people will use these connectors, as you see here, these GST connectors. I don't really want to do that because, as you can see, space is a premium here. It's a really tight build, so I'm just going to simply join it directly, direct solder. So my goal is to do as minimal wire as possible. Well, or as I guess within reason, right? So I don't want to make it so difficult that if I screw up, I'm irreversible. But I'd say, so this wire is going to fit behind the camera, or the Beck. So I've got plenty of room there, but I don't want to have to use it all, so I'll go ahead and probably just go right about there. That looks good. And then I always save these connectors because with JSTs you can never have enough of them. So I just set it off to the side and I'll use it for something else. This is using the silicone coating, which is a lot easier to work with, especially with your fingernails. So same procedure. I'm just going to go ahead and this time I'll use a helping hands. And we're just going to come in here and we're going to tin the wire. And you always want to have the soldering iron behind the wire when you're doing this type of stuff. That way it goes through it and it kind of intertwines within the wire. Now the next step is going to be simply joining the wire, which, oh, actually there's another step that I almost forgot about. So something that every workstation should have is some heat shrink. So what we're going to do, I usually forget about this and then I have to do it after the fact, but that's okay. So I'm going to take I don't have red that quite fits, so I'm going to do black and blue. And then what I tend to do is I just take, make sure you get enough that'll cover it. Which in my case, that should be about right. Do that again, keep it on the table. And then take this, kind of hold it steady, and then really just a touch is all you need. Just want to get it hot enough, or there we go, just a touch. So that's pretty good. It's not going to go anywhere. Hopefully you can see that. So I've got my wires tinned and joined. Alright, I've covered my wires with heat shrink. Now I've got what's called a heat gun. This is I don't know if you can see it, it's a Wagner Turbo Cool. This is actually something that I bought probably close to 20 years ago for the express purpose of melting paint on my old house, on the exterior, so I could scrape it away, because we had a latex painted house, which was a real pain. This has new life. Some people will use their soldering guns. I've done that, but it tends to take a little bit longer when you use the soldering gun barrel, and it's great. Does a really nice job sealing up, and now we're good to go. Okay, I just went ahead and clipped off the other end of this beck right here, and one of the things I want to do is I want to just confirm that I've got the beck plugged in correctly, which, as you can see, there's really no labeling on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to power it up, and then I'm going to check the output. So I should have 12 volts if everything was done correctly. Now, it's not a good idea just to power things up, without securing them. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of get this secured and then plug in the battery. And then I'm going to simply check the lead, black, red. I'm getting 11.5 volts, so that's pretty good. So shut this off. I don't know if you saw everything, probably not, but that was pretty ridiculous, which is good. That means the F3 flight controller is working well, because it's actually looking for a transmitter, which I don't have hooked up yet. So, but before you do anything with your video transmitter, there's something that you need to do, and that's put an antenna on it and make sure that the antenna is the right type. So this particular antenna is SMA. You can see because it has just an empty hole, and then this is an SMA male, so I'm going to go ahead and put that on there. And the reason you want to do that is if you power up a video transmitter without an antenna, all of that heat is going to damage the circuitry and the components, and your video transmitter is not going to transmit very far, if at all. So I learned that the hard way. I think most people in the hobby did. But so always first thing you should do with the video transmitter is put an antenna on it. Alright, so there's been a slight change of plans, and because of the really tight space that I have to work with, I'm going to go ahead and use a video transmitter that I had on another build, which is basically a rebranded Hawkeye, and this is from Mini Quad Bros. These actually work really well, and I think it's going to fit a lot better, so I'll be able to put this in here like that, the antenna mount, and then I'll be able to easily tie in to the power here, and then I've got my video here, and then I can also run output power. It looks like it's 5 volt though, so I think that's just enough, because this camera was 5 volt to 17, so I should still be able to tie into this. So now I'm taking off the top plate. That way I can go ahead and lay out my video transmitter the way I want it to. So I am going to have to run the wire under the top plate in order for it to make it all the way back. Alright, so that's nice. You can see how nice and tight the build is. Got the flight controller here. It looks like it's oriented backwards. So I'm sure they've got that set. You can see a nice, very nice soldering job of all the ESCs. Looks like a really well laid out build. So I'm going to go ahead and put my antenna on the top plate and make sure it's connected. As I said earlier, you always want to make sure before you do anything with the video transmitter, you connect the antenna. So that fits in very nicely. Close up. So I'll just go ahead and put a couple zip ties to hold it in place. And then I've already got my channel dialed in, which for me, I fly 5769, which is right in the middle of the race band. Alright, I've got a zip tie around it now, as you can see here. So that should be pretty good. Just going to go ahead and kind of test it, make sure it still dry fits. And the reason it's so important with that setup is that, as you can see, there's really no clearance here, or very little clearance where the antenna is and the propellers are. So I don't have a whole lot of options. I can't really have anything above. I don't want stuff hanging out, so I really had to use that Hawkeye Mini Quad Bros. And basically, see if I can get on the camera here. That's a little better. That's a little bit. The last thing that I really need to do is power up the camera from, so I've got the positive, the negative, as well as the video. And then what I'm going to do is power that from my video transmitter, which is really this. So I've got plenty of cord here. Probably going to shorten it a little bit so I have some wiggle room. But then I'm basically going to strip these down, solder them, and join them. Right, I'm going to go ahead and trim off the ends and these jacks since I don't need them. I'm going to leave a fair amount of room so that way I can kind of let the top hang. Because if you get it too tight, you know, you might accidentally rip it off or something. So now that I've got those cut, I'm going to go in here and, just like I did before, I'm going to take my fingernails and just get a little piece of wire exposed. Now I really just need to join up the wires from the chassis, or the connector that plug into the video transmitter. These are kind of short, no big deal. I'll do the same thing. Trim these, my fingernails, and this is going to be the output to the camera. And I believe, I want to say it's either 5 volt or 12 volt, but it really doesn't matter because I know that camera's got a pretty broad range. I'm going to throw it up here in the clips. It only takes a second, especially with these small wires. Just make sure you don't have a cold joint. But it's if your iron is hot enough, that should not be an issue. That should be good. As long as it's somewhere, you can usually get the job done. There we go. I like to sometimes just kind of eyeball it, make sure it looks like it's going to stay. Last thing you want is something coming loose when you're flying, which is just no fun. Sometimes I'll redo them. There we go. Yeah, it looks really good. Alright. Alright, that looks pretty good. A little jagged, but no biggie. Alright. Alright, so now that that's done, I've got the heat shrink on here. Once again, I'm going to seal those up, shrink them up. I did. Alright, so that looks pretty tight, nice and tight. So now it's just a matter of, I gotta plug this in. Plug this back into the video transmitter. is always fun. But see, now this is kind of nice because when I take the top off, I've got some room. Downside is I've got a little bit of mess, but I'll clean that up in a bit and I'll show you what I'm going to do. But basically I'm going to kind of wad it up and zip tie it. Alright, now the real test begins. I went ahead and checked all my connections, made sure everything looked good, which it does. Red, black, yellow, camera. I've got my Fat Shark goggles plugged in, tuned to my channel. So basically I'm just going to give this a quick plug in, make sure that I get a video signal. And no magic smoke. And good news. So I don't know if you can see through there, but kind of see it. So we're in good shape. Everything powered up just fine. So that means I am all set. Now the one thing that I still need to do that I haven't done yet is I need to add the XSR, which is my Taranis receiver. Okay, I've went ahead and zip tied up a few things here, and I found a little channel through here on the side, which is really nice. So I was able to route all of my video transmitter wires through that. So that actually worked out really well. Alright, I've gone ahead and added the XSR right behind the camera. Seemed like a really good spot. And now I'm just taking the white, which is the servo, the red and the black, and connecting them into the board. Alright, now I'm going to try to bind it. See if I can get enough fingers and hands going here. I think that's good. Now let's see if it binds up. Yep, we're good. We got a green light on the XSR, so should be good to go. So that's good news. And actually we know we're bound because we're not getting the annoying crazy beeps, which is even better. Pretty much the finished product. I've got these zip tied down. I think they look pretty decent. Got the lid on. It actually fit really well. But I zip tied everything down. And I've got the antenna mounted here, which I really like. Check that out. Nice and slim and very good mounting. And look at that clearance. There's just virtually no clearance there. You can see that things aren't quite as clean as they were pre-FPV. However, there's no issue with those wires there. They're pretty well protected, and they're tucked behind the XT60 connector, so I don't really see a major issue there, and I think it's fine. I'd rather do that than route them above. They're nice and tight and zip tied. And then of course I've got my camera in the front and the XSR for the Taranis under there, so that just got a few more screws to put in and I'm all set. So I'm very happy with how this turned out. Can't wait to give it a shot. Alright, one last thing is I'm just going to weigh it. Make sure I got a good idea of how heavy it is. It's coming in right at 390 grams. So for a hexacopter with FPV, with everything on it, but the battery, 390 is really good in my opinion. And then with the battery, let's see what that is. It's about 537, so not too bad considering it's a hex. Alright, apologize for the video audio here, but I realized that my camera was not recording audio at this point. So anyway, I plugged in the USB and I needed to configure it for clean flight, which is what I'm doing here, just connecting to it. I'm kind of checking to make sure everything's running okay, which it appears to be. So you want to make sure that your hex is, rotating based on, how things should look. So that's basically all that's going on here. On this tab, I'm checking my PID values and just some of the rates that are set up. So what I noticed is that the PID values were a little lower, which I think is fine. I was a little surprised to see them so low, but that's how it was tuned. And then I also saw the rates were very low, and I'm used to running maybe 0.7 to 0.8, so all I'm doing here is just changing the rates to how I normally fly. At this point, I'm checking to see my transmitter, radio transmitter, which is a Taranis. I just want to check and see how things look there. So luckily with this particular F3 board it was kind of nice. I didn't actually have to plug my battery in. Apparently there's enough juice through the USB to power the radio receiver. So once I did all that and checked it, everything looked good. Everything was pretty much already set as expected. So I really didn't have to do a lot to change on this. But sometimes you might have to change your throttle mapping and so on and so forth. And here we are in the modes tab, and this is where you're basically going to be setting up all of your different switches. I like to arm mine with a switch, so I put it on the very top upper right hand switch, and I'm just used to doing that. Before I was able to add these switches though, I had to go into my Taranis and just configure a channel mix. So that's a little out of scope for this video, but it's really not hard to do. You're basically going in and adding your first 3 switches that you want to use. Once all of your mixes are set up properly and your switches are then added, you can then go in and basically set up your arming, which is the first thing that I do here. So once my switch is working and I confirm that, I just set a range for where it's on the very down position that it arms the hexacopter. No problem there. After I set up arming, then I set up the flight modes like Horizon and Acro, which I usually put on the switch closest to me, which is that long skinny switch in the middle. I also set up the alarm buzzer, which is the one right next to it on the right. And then I also set air mode, which I set to be the same as arming. So that's pretty much how I configure mine. Everybody does it a little bit different, but that works for me. Anyway, I think I got pretty much everything covered here, and stay tuned for the main video. Thanks for watching.